Divas, welcome back to another Reporter Roundtable. I know you guys love these. And this week it is Forrest Saunders and myself here in the Speakeasy. Forrest Saunders, Capitol reporter for EW Scripps. You will want to hear this. It's been a big week in news. We had the budget. Remember the budget way back when? Governor DeSantis acted on the budget, delivered a whopping number of line item vetoes. Of course, what dominated the news this week? A migrant detention center smack dab in the middle of the Everglades. It's been dubbed Alligator Alcatraz. Yes, we talk quite a bit about that, a little bit about the midterms, and oh my, we get very deep into the founding fathers and Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams. Stick with us for a Reporter Roundtable with Forrest Saunders.
This was the mandate that voters gave them in 24, and they have to deliver. And so, DeSantis, like he has in the past, always leans in on what he sees are the big red meat GOP goals.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara Cam, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Divas, oh my gosh. Yes, it is time for... You guys love this when we do this. And today it's just the two of us, me and my old pal, Forrest Saunders, EW Scripps, Capitol Bureau reporter. You didn't even
look at a note.
I didn't even have to.
No.
Welcome back to the Speakeasy.
Yeah.
And it's just the two of us today. Our Trace Amigo is out of town.
Yeah,
so
he's getting a needed break.
Yes, he's not joining us. But we have so much to talk about. Gosh, remember when it used to be that the summer was the quiet time in Tallahassee and we all used to be scrounging around, poking under rocks for stories?
Yeah, I was chasing Nikki Fried down to oyster farms because I was like, I have got to do something today. I mean, I was driving like an hour out of town in order to get content.
Yeah.
And now it's like, it's just readily available. It's a buffet. And in fact, it's too much. I have already eaten my fill.
Yeah, we're gorging. We're gorging on the news, and it's quite a lot to keep up with. So we're going to go through some of what we've got today. First, I'm going to tell everyone that I'm busy because I am busy. So don't text me, right?
Well, you did this at 9 a.m. and I have to tell you, as I've gotten older, I always thought it was easier when you get older. You wake up sooner. I always thought that was the case, that you'd get up and pop out of bed. But as I've gotten closer and closer to 40, I'm now 2 away. I find it that I enjoy sleeping in, and it is almost impossible sometimes for me to get up and do something at 9.
So you are I am on the opposite. I am approaching being so old that where you don't sleep anymore. Do you remember your grandmother saying
she's up at 4. Yeah. And then eating dinner at 4:30 p.m.
Okay, I don't do that.
I'm just saying that's what's coming.
I don't do that, and I'm not at 4. I'm not up at 4, but yeah, I am. I do find that I don't know. It's weird.
I can't wait for prostate problems. It's going to be great. It's going to be excellent. It's going to really look. Okay.
We're going to move ahead, move forward. Obviously, the big news it would have been. Yeah. That the governor signed the budget the day before the fiscal year. I know. We're recording this on a Thursday. Again, we have to give the caveat that this is a Thursday morning and a holiday weekend, coming up to a holiday weekend. Mm-hmm. And oh my goodness, whatever we're saying now could be totally eclipsed by what happens before this comes out on Sunday. But
we got the Friday, probably going to be today, 5 p.m. or so. There's going to be that news dump before we hit the weekend.
He gave the state workers off today.
That's true. I forgot about that. So maybe we won't see it.
And I saw the governor's schedule. All he had on his schedule was that event in Monticello yesterday. Mm-hmm. Morning, and so I'm hoping that they went on vacation somewhere, or they took the kids and they're doing a picnic somewhere in American, whatever, Florida.
Yeah, they're doing maybe a stop at a theme park. I think they all need it.
I don't know. I know we need it. So please, no data dumps this afternoon, y'all. Even though you won't be hearing this, we should put out a tweet, I guess. Okay, so week started with the governor signing the budget and
Finally
issuing the vetoes. I was on the group chat with a bunch of reporters, and there seemed to be a lot of confusion about how much was vetoed and like where it was in the budget and there's a real the governor has a penchant for like the big, and very much like the president, like the biggest tax cut ever known to mankind, the first of its kind.
They're
ever
great at branding,
in Florida
yes.
history.
Yep.
Yes, it's like the biggest and the best and the first and the only. So I don't know. Can you tell me? I was busy in federal court from 9 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock in the afternoon.
Rub that in my face.
On the ballot initiative.
Oh, yeah.
So I was busy doing that. So I was anyway. So tell me what with the budget, and then we'll talk about the news that everybody really is focused on.
Yeah. So this happened down in the Villages, which is a DeSantis-friendly place. It was a cheering throng of folks who probably eat around 5 p.m. every day, and it was
they're spicy down there in the Villages.
Every time I go down there,
STDs and
the loofahs.
Yeah.
Every time I go down there, I think to myself, I could do this. I could make this transition real easy. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Because I'm much closer to that cohort. In fact, I'm probably in that cohort, and that just gives me the ick.
My dad told me the other day that I have been 50 years old since I was 11 years old.
Yeah, but I'm over 50, and it gives me the ick.
No.
Oh, look, he's sweet to say that.
For once, I think you deserve a few compliments. Jason's not here to give you the love eyes anymore, so I've got to step up.
My long, tall drinks of water here.
No, so we're down in the Villages.
The fair-haired, the fair-skinned one, and the swarthy one. So I got all my needs being met when these guys are in the room.
I'm doing everything I can to get a little more swarthy. I am very proud of my tan line.
Oh, he does. He has a farmer's tan with the watch.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that because back in Iowa, I gave Dracula a run for his money. I was as pale as you get.
No, you're not. I didn't mean that I didn't call you pale. I think I called you fair-skinned.
Fair-skinned. I am fair-skinned.
Yeah.
That's a fair assessment.
Well, I'm a Mediterranean ethnicity, so...
I think I'm just white. I don't know what I am. I've got...
Anyway. We're moving on to the
budget.
To the budget.
Okay.
In the Villages.
117.
Great favorite backdrop of governors in Florida for doing budget announcements.
$117.4 billion is what the governor's office said was the final bill when you incorporate the front and the back of the bill. So all in all, $117.4 billion.
The back of the bill is where most of the juicy stuff is, folks.
It is. For
those of you who don't know, even though you all are sophisticated divas and you know all that. But
the scandalous
for those of you who don't know, that's where all the words are. A lot. But anyway.
It is. It's a word salad back there, and a lot of money. But in the end, it was, again, according to the governor's office, about $600 million lighter than what the legislature sent them. Again, if you do... all $600 million, that's their words.
Okay.
And 1798 is what the legislature sent them, again, front and back. And so they trimmed, they say, through line items, about $600 million. Now, that gets confusing because everybody else is like, well, wait a second, wasn't it like $1.3 billion or something like that they cut out? It gets confusing because there were programs that he axed that aren't exactly eliminating that money, but they're not going where they were originally going to go. So $200 million that was going to come from the wildlife corridor and was going to be put in general fund.
Right.
He said, nah. So he did veto that provision, but the money just stays in the wildlife corridor. So the money doesn't come out. It wasn't like you reduced spending. Right?
Oh, okay. So it's like... you're moving it from one pot to another.
Exactly.
Kind of.
Exactly.
You're changing where it is, the allocation goes.
And then there's the $750 million that they were going to use to shore up the budget in that constitutional amendment program. Again, axed funding, but still goes into the general coffers. It's still state money apportioned in the budget, but it just isn't going to go where the legislature originally wanted it to go.
All right.
If that makes more sense.
It makes as much sense as I want it to make right now, because that's not my bailiwick, and my eyes are starting to. He said that because he could see my eyes were starting to glaze over. But what are some of the big vetoes, big items that were vetoed, or the more interesting vetoes?
There were, there's been a lot of criticism of some of the water projects that the governor has axed millions of dollars there. There was, and here's where it always gets interesting, right? This is where we all like the palace intrigue is. What districts were hit?
Oh, how hard? How did he stick it to the speaker, Danny Paris?
And there were a number of projects, millions of dollars in Perez's district that were axed. And the governor's office will always say one of two things, which is number one, that's not something that the state should be spending its money on, or number two, we believe there are other funding streams to do this. But given the context of what happened during this last legislative session, we have to look at the relationship between the speaker and DeSantis and question whether or not this was, a punishment.
Yeah, there was no, the speaker wasn't with him. The president wasn't with him.
Sure.
He was there with some of his pals in the Senate and the House.
Right.
And so, clearly they're limping into the early legislative session, which begins in January. Yeah. And committees will start meeting in October.
Yeah.
So they've got a couple months off. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, we're not editorializing. We're just doing a little political analysis here.
Sure.
What do you think about the relationship between the governor and the speaker? I think the governor and the Senate President, Ben Albritton, are kind of simpatico. They're cool at this point. What do you think about, will they be singing Kumbaya going into the last session?
No, I think it's done. I think that, they will work together when they need to, but I think that they will always, they will have this antagonism between them at least through the next.
I think it's a "you're dead to me" kind of a thing.
And I mean,
but they have to work together to some extent.
The state has to function. The legislature has to produce policy, and DeSantis has to decide whether or not to sign it or veto it. So, I mean, they have to work together. And, there inevitably will be priorities of the speaker and the governor that will, maybe get negotiated into something. But I think if you just listen to the rhetoric of DeSantis when he speaks at events, talking about, signing the budget, he always gets a little jab in at the speaker. And, if it was let bygones be bygones, bridge, water under the bridge, he wouldn't be saying that stuff.
No, we're not bygoning.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think we're past that point, as you said. Well, let's shift a little bit to, I did see there was one thing that was vetoed. Actually, I saw it. I was only looking at the budget very briefly. There was a pilot program, ketamine treatment for vets. And
I did see that as well.
The governor vetoed that, so I don't know how
he also vetoed that policy that was supposed to crack down on alleged corruption.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a moment.
Sure.
Was that in the budget? That was a bill.
It was just a bill.
Yeah. So this would have banned, I think it would have prohibited state employees from campaigning,
soliciting. Yeah.
I think but kind of trying to my mind, reestablish what used to be sort of a bright line between the governance side of political offices and the campaign offices. And we've seen a lot of crossover with that in recent years. And I'm thinking one thing in particular was the governor's then chief of staff, James Uthmeier, who is now the attorney general, was also serving while he was in that chief of staff role as the manager of two campaign committees that were created to fight the abortion amendment and the rec pot amendment. and he did not take a leave of absence. And for those of us who are long in the tooth like I am,
I'm getting there.
well, no, you're not. But for those of us who've been around, there was a time when like every reporter in the world would have been writing like lots and lots of stories about that. And I don't know. I mean, it didn't really even
register.
Generate a single story on its own, I don't think.
Yeah.
That would have been, and I think this bill was born of the investigation into Hope, Florida. So because we don't need to rehash all of that, but right. So that's something I saw somebody on social media was positing that the legislature could come back and override. And I personally don't see an appetite on the Senate side for overrides.
Exactly.
I don't know that that's something that they would do come the fall. You want to start off your your second and final year as leader by essentially pissing off the governor right out of the gate. I don't know.
And just from a strategy standpoint, I mean, what's the point in doing it when you can just pass it again in the next session, which is only a few months away, when you have all the lawmakers back? If you want to try again, you can. You can push it in the next session. If you feel like you can make a tweak or something like that, you can bring it back in a different form. I mean, that's how they do it, whenever the governor has traditionally vetoed something. But I think I saw the same post, right, which was Forrest was talking to Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, but he was. Go ahead.
No, and I think that you're right. The Senate doesn't necessarily have an appetite. It's just a question of whether or not they want to try again next year because it's a priority of the speaker. And it may be. I don't know. And if they want to try again, they could. But DeSantis might just veto it again.
Exactly. But and then he's out of office next year. So maybe if there's anybody who hanging around in 2 years, they might want to come back and tackle it.
They could.
I don't know.
They could.
But Juan Porras is very. He's a Trump guy. Mm-hmm. And he was one of a handful of legislators who came out very closely aligned with the speaker and Trump, and has been very highly critical, openly critical of the governor. And I don't know that what Juan Porras is telling Matt Gaetz necessarily reflects the sentiment of the 120 members of the House of Representatives.
No,
I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not belittling him. I'm just saying that's him.
I know that he's close with Speaker Perez.
Yes.
And so whenever I hear him speak about something, I almost sort of think of him as somewhat of a surrogate.
Yeah, he's like a lieutenant for the speaker. So
right.
For sure he's got chops. I'm not, maybe I didn't word that.
No. I think you absolutely are fair in that assessment.
We got to get him on this show. I want to get him on this show.
He's a fascinating guy to
really
talk
interesting.
to. Yeah, he is. And I always appreciate this about a lawmaker. Have conviction, right? Believe what you believe.
Walk the walk.
Exactly. And stand behind your bill. And Representative Porras is one of those people. He will tell you whatever you want to know about the piece of legislation, and he doesn't support something unless he supports it personally, which I respect.
He's always seemed like a straight shooter to me. So I haven't had many interactions with him, but there's a lot of gamesmanship that goes on and palace intrigue and whatnot. Let me just say, he hasn't lied to my face as far as I know right now. So I can put him on one hand of lawmakers. No, just kidding. You guys never lie. Nobody ever lies. And we'll be right back with Forrest Saunders. Divas, guess what? It's summer. And we're going to take a little break. We're going to take a little summer vacation. Anybody out there knows where Dog Island is? That's where I'll be. We'll be gone for a couple of weeks, but we'll be sharing some throwback episodes with you while we're away. I hope you enjoy those. So sit back, relax, and join us for some Throwback Sundays. Divas, you know what time it is. It's that time. It is the news in haikus. The news in haikus. This week's haiku brought to you and read by Forrest Saunders.
So, are you going to put the music in again? Because it was really peaceful.
The music
and calm.
Always goes in.
I loved the music. It was great. It got
Mike
positive
does
reviews.
That. Mike does that,
Well,
yes.
The only thing he's ever
Mike.
done right. Yeah.
Oh, stop.
I said that just to get it, Mike, but here we go. Jefferson now sits in Monticello. He writes, wonder who is next.
Here's one we got from a listener. Swampy Alcatraz. Gators and pythons, oh my. Stoneman Douglas weeps. The news in haikus. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your haiku. You can slide them into my DMs, or you can send them to podcasts. That's podcasts with an S at e.newsserviceflorida.com. Wherever you're listening, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a rating if you like what we're doing. And we're back with Forrest Saunders, Capitol reporter for EW Scripps. All right, now we're going to get to the stuff that everybody's talking about. International news. It would have been interstellar if we had a colony somewhere, because this was huge news. Yeah.
We were the center of the political universe, I think, for 2 days at least.
And possibly we still will be, because they're going to be, I guess they are now trucking people in.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the immigration detention center that is built in the Everglades, surrounded by the Big Cypress National Preserve, and the subject of a lawsuit. The environmentalists have filed a lawsuit. By the way, Divas, I'll give you a little tease. We're going to have Eve Samples, the executive director of the Friends of the Everglades, that is one of the 2 lead plaintiffs in that lawsuit, on next week. And she and I'm pretty sure she used to work for the Palm Beach Post when I worked.
Oh, really?
Here
I didn't know she was a journalist prior.
She was a journalist, for many years. And she wrote about the environment. But she was up in the Tea Coast, and I was always up here in the Tallahassee Bureau. But anyway, what are you calling? I'm resisting calling it Alligator Alcatraz, although it seems to be, everyone is calling it
They
that.
have now put up a sign outside the facility that says Alligator Alcatraz. The state is considering it the formal name of the spot. So, I mean, I know that it's a charged name for some people, like it's politically charged, and some people have even called it disgusting. Critics have taken issue with about every aspect of it, but the way that I handle it is I refer to it first as a migrant detention and deportation facility. Mm-hmm. And then I say also known or dubbed Alligator Alcatraz.
Dubbed. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Should I write that down? I can use it. Do I have to give you a nickel?
No, you don't have to pay me anything. But
no, that's what I've been doing.
It's a full sentence in order to just introduce it.
Yes. So it's creating quite a stir.
It's a word. And it's doing exactly what I think the governor's office hoped it would do.
So brilliant. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is an opportunity for them to lean in and do some of that red meat stuff that they have basically become famous for. I mean, his comms team leading up to his 2024 run, they were the best in the country. I mean, you could make that argument. And that was because they just leaned in on all these issues. They had catchy headlines and titles. Yep. They were able to make splashy, big Republican goals happen. And this is sort of like OG DeSantis, right? It's
on steroids, though. And, they went in there, they did this, they seized the property.
Yeah, they did.
I mean, you talk about bigfooting. They just like, okay, the history of this property is very interesting to me, and I'm sure you know it. I read about it in the lawsuit, and I was listening to them talk about it. The whole
reason that Friends of the Everglades exists. The whole
reason, and really part of the federal law that is the basis of this lawsuit, where you have to go and do a impact study on the impact of the land around whatever you're building,
right.
Was born of, wait for it, an airport exactly where this landing strip and training facility is right now.
Yeah, it was supposed to be the biggest in the world.
Yeah. I mean, and I do, that just, to me, it gets lost in, I think, a lot of the daily coverage of, cages and
it does.
whatever,
I mean, there are so many different layers to this
Yeah.
story. And I think that, if you start with a lawsuit, you just look at that. It's a very simple concept for people to understand. A lot of times you get lost in the legalese of these.
No, this one's like, I highly recommend people go ahead and we should probably post a link to it somewhere.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
And it is simple as, and please, add some further context, but it's as simple as I understand it, they did not do a public comment. They did not do an environmental impact study when they put a facility at this basically defunct airport that was just sitting there in the middle of the Everglades, and now is going to house, up to 3,000 detainees, has 1,000 staff members, has, 400 security personnel, all in this one location. And their contention is these environmentalist groups are saying this is going to obviously have an impact. And you didn't do a study that is required under federal law because of this very airport.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of amazing.
Yeah.
And the governor has created a state of emergency in Florida, issued an emergency executive order saying that this immigration situation is resulted in a statewide emergency, and he has renewed that state of emergency, and so he used these emergency powers to seize this airport, which was training for military. I think it was doing some kind of...
It might have been county. I don't know. I mean, it was obviously operated by Collier and Miami-Dade counties.
Yeah, so it's right. It's part of the land is in Collier County and part of it is in Miami-Dade County. The actual landing strip, I think, is in Miami-Dade County. And then, of course, you have the impact on the critters that live in the Everglades. There's panthers.
Sure.
There are only between 130 and 200 and some panthers that are still alive today, and they have been tracked directly on that property, according to the lawsuit. There's also certain kinds of bats that are very rare that live on that property, and there are other species that are endangered that this is that would be impacted by this. One of the things is we don't think about this. Also, this is the light pollution. Yep. People go out there because I think this is supposed to be, there's a word for it. The environmentalists have a word for it, but it's like one of the darkest places.
Oh. That makes sense because it's in the middle of nothing.
Certainly in Florida. And so people go out there just to go and observe this darkness. And I don't know, I'm going to Dog Island in a couple weeks and spend a week out there. And one of the things I love about being out there is just that if you don't know, you don't know. But if you have ever been in a place where there is no or little light pollution, there are lots and lots of stars in the sky that we're not able to see.
No, you can see the cross section of the Milky Way galaxy very clearly when you don't have any light pollution. Now, I say that because I came from a place that has almost no light, not the Everglades, but Iowa.
Right. Wait a minute.
Thank you. Okay. Corn doesn't glow in the dark. But it was very, very much the same. I grew up in that kind of world, and it was absolutely stunning. But I just want to, I got to get the state side out there, too.
Sure, go ahead.
They think that, they're in the clear because they're not. This is an airport that was pre-established. And if you look at their legal filings, basically what they're saying is this lawsuit is baloney because the airport was already here. We're just adding temporary structures.
Well, okay, but that's true. Yeah. However, there will be. I mean, anyone can tell you that when you're adding in all these trucks, forget about all the people and the transportation of sewage and water in and out of there every day, which I think that's what they're going to be doing.
That's what AG Uthmeier said. Is they're bringing the food in and taking the sewage out. Right. And so they're not putting any permanent piping or anything like that in there. But at the same time, if you're going to have trucks coming in and out and people moving in and out,
there's not a major
landing.
Highway. There's not a major highway going in and out of there either.
And then just also think about, landing of planes, right? If this is going to become an active airport again.
Right. Because they want to deport these folks back to wherever they want to deport them to. I won't say back to because they may want to deport them to other countries.
Sure. There's definitely going to be more activity there, and that is going to have an impact. It might be a small impact on the environment, might be a big one. The lawsuit will hopefully suss that out.
Right. Yeah. So that's just the environmental side.
Yeah.
Then you've got what do you call them? Miccosukee tribe.
Oh, yeah, the tribal issue, too.
They actually, I don't know if they filed new litigation but they are saying that this is within 900 feet of where some of them live. Because they have a reservation out there, the Big Cypress Reservation, actually. So impact on, and this is also their ancestral home, the Seminoles and the Miccosukees. So there's that. And then the governor's office is also arguing that the environmentalists, I haven't seen their response to what the Miccosukees are arguing, that the environmentalists, that they really are just opposed to this, like philosophically opposed to this detention center. And that's why they're moving forward. Now, I will say that these folks that are participating in this lawsuit, these lawyers and these members of these enviro groups, they are like truly they're out there like wading and kayaking and, measuring water levels and things like that. That's all I'll say about that. But
and then there are other aspects too. And I think for Democrats and critics that I've talked to, one of their biggest is they just feel like it's inhumane.
It's an internment. I've heard it being likened. Yep. In fact, George Takei likened it to the internment camp where he and his parents were sent when he was a child. He's Japanese descent. Yep. And that's what we did back in World War II.
Are you talking about that George from Star Trek?
Oh, yeah. You didn't see that?
No, I didn't see that.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I got one in then that you weren't aware of. He's my news guy here. He's the one who's telling me everything before the show. I'm taking little notes. I mean, they're cages, intense, or, a lot of people crammed into a pretty small space. I think I read one of the things was like 7 square feet per person. I don't know if that's actually what this is like. They planned that they said they had, I think for Camp Blanding, but it was 7 square feet per person.
It's a hard topic to talk about.
Yeah, because we are journalists, we are reporters, we're not editorial writers. And so we are and I try really hard, especially, always with our print journalism or our online journalism. Yeah. And it gets a little bit, every now and then someone will tell me, oh, you went a little over the line on the podcast. So it's, you're talking, tell people, let's give them something, like make some news here. So folks, we are actually human beings and we actually have thoughts about things.
I've told
it's
panels,
really hard to just check those at the door when you walk into the press center or the Capitol or the press gallery or whatever.
We all experience in real time reactions to stories. We have opinions and we have to internalize it. Mm-hmm. Our job comes first.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell you that it's impossible to, to not show emotion in your pieces. But what we do is we try and limit that as much as possible.
Sure.
Because we're not capable of it. I'm not a robot. I've told panels before, I'm not an automaton that can suss out all of the potential bias in myself. But I do know what is fair, and I do know the voices that I want to have reflected in my piece in order to make it well-rounded.
Right.
And I try and use those as guiding principles in everything that I generate.
Yeah. And we're channeling a lot of what other people are telling us, right? And so this is a completely unrelated to the detention center or anything, but we experience a lot of trauma when we're reporting on events or just talking to people who have lost loved ones, during and after natural disasters or mass shootings, or, there's whole courses that are taught on trauma. And
we do that every day.
Yeah.
You're talking to people a lot of times, especially in general assignment news. Back when I was in Iowa, you're talking to people who are experiencing the worst day of their life almost every day.
Yeah.
And that weighs on you eventually. And some people, they get out of the business because they just can't handle that.
It's a lot. And so what we're talking about now here with the building, and one of the things that Democrats and critics of this are commenting on is just the kind of the glee that the proponents of this facility and that, they're high-fiving each other. They're monetizing this Alligator Alcatraz moniker. The Republican Party of Florida is selling, caps and T-shirts and mugs. I'm sure they're going to get snapped up all over the place. And so, and at the same time, we have to think about, these are human beings.
Yeah.
They're being separated from their families. This is what the other side, or critics are saying, that, not all of these people necessarily are these dangerous criminals.
Yeah.
Although the story I saw from the Miccosukee tribal leader was saying, like, okay, the president said these are the most dangerous people on earth, and you're putting them right on our doorstep. Like, this is a safety issue for us.
Well, and they've been a little mixed on that message because I was watching the pool feed as well, right? And you had Trump in the penitentiary itself,
right,
in some of the holding cells. And he was walking around and he was talking to a small press corps there.
Yeah.
And he was saying, a lot of these people, they just want to go home. And so we're happy to do it. And then they explained that, the migrants who come to this facility will have a chance to potentially self-deport
right,
one more time before they go inside.
Right.
And I think Secretary Noem said that they would buy them a plane ticket that day and get them out of there if that's what they wanted to do. And then they would have the chance to come back at a later time. So right there shows you that they are preparing for people who are not criminals, criminals in the sense that they committed a violent crime or something like that. These are people who maybe got swept up or had a visa expire or, are here without documentation, but haven't committed a heinous crime and are not, as the president has described, the worst people in the world.
Right.
So they're preparing for that. So I don't know how many of these people at this facility are going to be, in that column, or how many people are going to be violent offenders.
And it also, another factor goes back into what we were talking about earlier, that the governor is like, Florida is leading on this. Florida, we were the first to do requiring everybody to enter into these 287G contracts with the feds. He wants Florida to be, I don't know if it's like a numbers thing, where you can say, okay, well, we have collected X number of undocumented immigrants and deported X number, and we are, because he does say, he says, we're leading the nation on this. It's not like he's unabashed about wanting to help the president.
They see this as the big political boon next to the economy, right? This was the mandate that voters gave them in 24, and they have to deliver. And so, DeSantis, like he has in the past, always leans in on what he sees are the big red meat GOP goals. And this is just one of the latest examples. And we're talking about, quote unquote, Alligator Alcatraz, but we haven't even mentioned the fact that they're working on a second facility at Camp Landing. Right, just outside of Jacksonville in Northeast Florida. And this is going to be a facility that can house up to 2,000.
Right.
And then, cumulative capacity for the state could be up to 5,000. So this is not just Florida's detention center. This sounds more and more like America's.
Well, the part of the reason for that is ICE does not have enough detention center beds.
Right.
So they don't have enough detention beds. That's been a problem. And I've heard Sheriff Galtieri talk about this all the time. He's been participating. He's been working with ICE for years on this issue. So this is a way of, I don't know how, I doubt that it's exponentially increasing the number of ICE beds, but we're going to be providing a lot more beds. And, whether they're all going to be coming from Florida, I don't know. In Jacksonville, it would really make sense that they're going to be coming in, they're going to be bringing in people from Georgia. I don't know about Miami. I don't know what the plan is.
We really haven't gotten those
details. But we also have a lot of undocumented immigrants in Florida.
Sure.
So it's an interesting political, social, environmental. It has so many layers, as you said.
I talked to a Democrat just the other day about this whole project, and they believed that there was a real chance, because if you look online, and I know that, social media is not a barometer for the pulse of the nation like we sometimes think it is, or we attribute it to be. But you will see posts where some people are like, I'm all for getting rid of undocumented people. Mm-hmm. But do we have to grandstand? Do we have to do the political theater?
Right.
And so this Democrat was saying, you watch, Democrats are definitely going to condemn this, but Republicans will keep leaning in because they think it's a big win. Mm-hmm. But they said they did not believe, much like first term Trump, they did not believe that Americans wanted to see how the sausage is made. Because the moment that those pictures of kids
being torn away from their mothers, the kids crying.
Once that went out, it became a rallying cry for Democrats and opponents of the president's agenda back in the first term. And it was ultimately one of the things that defeated him in 2020. So you fast forward to this now, and there's this question of whether or not leaning in like this, creating facilities like this, while Republicans are eating it up largely and celebrating it. Is it the win that they think it is, or is it going to isolate some of those more moderates who do not want to see how this happens?
And how will that play out in the midterms?
Right. Don't know.
Speaking of the midterms, did you like that?
That was a good transition.
Yeah. Speaking of the midterms, we saw, you mentioned this. So this was the grand opening was on whatever day that was, Tuesday. Right? And the president came down and joined the governor. James Uthmeier was like, I guess, kind of the architect of this.
It was his brainchild. He came up with it, posted it only a few weeks ago on social media. It was like 2 weeks ago. He said, hey, we're going to do this. And at the time, he estimated that it would take 1 to 2 months to make it.
Yeah.
And then it took 8 days.
It took 8 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing.
It really was. I mean, but this is another one of those things that DeSantis loves to tout, is that he can make stuff happen fast.
Build a bridge.
Almost always mentions that bridge.
Yes, he does.
Which was impressive.
It was impressive. Yeah. It was impressive. But anyway, so this, I'm watching you, the Pool Report, and I'm watching on Twitter. And so the president shows up with the Gulf of America hat, by the way. And he brings his posse.
Yes.
Byron Donalds and Danny Perez.
Danny was there.
And
House Speaker.
Yes, the House Speaker, and Wilton Simpson.
Joe Gruters.
And Joe Gruters.
Yeah.
And so it was like,
it felt like your exes were in the room, right? It was like an entourage of DeSantis's exes, right, hanging out in the room in one place. And so what's interesting about that is that originally, when I was hearing rumblings that this was going to happen, I was told, they were going to do maybe some kind of tour on Monday, and then they were going to do a big press event on Tuesday for the first arrival of detainees. And that was sort of how it was planned out. But then we found out that Trump was going to arrive, that the president was going to be here, and all of a sudden, what was a governor's event became the president's event.
Yeah.
And because of that, you had a whole new guest list. And so if you know anything about Florida politics, even I think the layperson who doesn't spend every day thinking about the palace intrigue of Florida politics, I think they know that there is a group of Trump people and there is a group of DeSantis people, and they were all of a sudden just mashed into one room together. And so I think outwardly, you can make the argument that, this was the kumbaya moment. Republicans had rallied together and they were, coming together for the party and for the purpose of making this facility great.
Right.
But there were still a lot of, I think, some tense moments right there in front of the public. Even on the pool feed, you could just see sort of everyone vying for attention for their guy or their people. And then I think there was some tremendous reporting from Matt Dixon that talked about Secretary Noem,
right,
and her relationship with DeSantis. They had wanted to wait. They wanted, DeSantis to wait for the president and everyone to arrive, and they were going to make it their event. But then DeSantis on Friday, a couple days before this big event on Tuesday, went on Fox News and gave Steve Doocy a tour of the facility as it was being constructed.
Oh.
And that really ticked off apparently Noem's team. Again, this is by the wonderful reporting of Matt Dixon from NBC News. Tip of the hat to you, buddy.
Yeah, Matt.
And so there was this behind the scenes, this turmoil. And then, of course, who shows up with Trump? Byron Donalds, who's running for governor. And there is some. And
Kristi Noem was there,
and Kristi Noem as well. And Joe Gruters.
Byron Donalds, just to remind ourselves, is a Trump endorsed candidate for governor next year. And still sort of like, will she, won't she, Casey DeSantis get into that race?
Yeah.
Wilton Simpson, also very close to the governor, to the president, I'm sorry. Also kind of, is he, I'm not sure. I saw a story saying that he was toying, he still hasn't ruled out running for governor.
I've heard so many interesting theories about how this is all going to go down. I think we talked about it last time I was here, but I don't remember. There was this speculation that maybe Wilton would jump in, the ag secretary would, and there would be a split endorsement that Trump would endorse two people, Donalds and Simpson.
Yeah.
And then they would offer up, the DeSantis folks who would offer up their ideal candidate, which, if it wasn't Casey, was potentially going to be Jay Collins. This was all just speculation from Republicans who, spend time in these circles. And and in that scenario, the vote would be split in the primary between Wilton and Donalds amongst the MAGA folk. And then, Jay or whomever could just scoop up all of the DeSantis support and wouldn't have to worry about getting split and would win the primary and then go on to fight, at this point, maybe David Jolly, I guess, as a Democrat and in the general election.
Is that still the Jay Collins kind? Well, because we're waiting to see who the governor appoints as LG to replace Jeanette Nunez.
And I think a lot of people are thinking that's going to be the springboard that'll launch whatever gubernatorial candidate DeSantis team wants. So, again, it's always possible that Casey could get in. And
I've talked about this with a lot of Republican and Democrats, consultants and experts and talking heads. And, I think there's so many variables in that still. It's early.
It is. It's super early.
A lot of it depends on, like today, Trump's popularity today and DeSantis's popularity in Florida today.
Absolutely.
That's all. Those are factors that could change significantly by the time the primary election rolls around next year.
Completely.
So I think, and also I think a lot of it's going to depend on fundraising. And
it'll depend on that. It'll depend on the Trump brand, I think, in the latter 2 years of his second term, right? I mean, I think we're going to wonder and wait and see if a guy like J.D. Vance can come out untarnished, or if whatever is happening right now, if there's because I think that I don't think anybody would disagree that because it happens to every president, doesn't matter who it is. Trump's approval rating is down compared to where it was when he started, and so if that trend continues and he continues to lose support by the end of his term, does that mean that someone like DeSantis could theoretically swoop in for 28,
for 28,
and be the golden child who was untarnished by this Trump term?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also hearing a lot of chatter now about the governor like taking over as president of the University of Florida after his term is over. So I don't know.
Well, that would be an interesting position, and I could, sure. Let's see. Have we put a pin in what I now just refer to amongst my peers as AA, not Alcoholics Anonymous, but Alligator Alcatraz? Is there more there that we need to discuss, do you think?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about it, because it is dominating the news cycle.
It is.
And I think that, so what do you think? Do you think that it's going to help? You mentioned that the Democrats are saying like, oh, this, like it's a bridge too far. It goes too far. I'm not sure that, I don't know that it does. I don't know. I think they're going to be the DeSantis people are very good at keeping stuff close to the vest, right?
Yeah,
and
they are.
And so I don't think we're going to be seeing pictures of children laying on the floor with silver blankets on them. I don't.
And they buffered, I think, the expectation Tuesday, when people came in, because I think a lot of people thought this was going to be a lot like what we saw during the first Trump term, and it was exactly as you described it, the silver blankets and all that stuff. But these were thanks to pictures from a few of the journalists out there, including Jason.
Yeah.
This was a linoleum floored
Right.
facility that had beds. They had air conditioning 24/7.
Yeah.
They made a point of saying that there were going to be legal resources there, that were going to be clergy. There's laundromats there. And they really, I think, tried to blunt the blow that this was inhumane treatment of people by saying, look at all of these amenities that we are doing and bringing to this facility to try and make this as accommodating as possible, with the goal of simply getting people who are here illegally out of the country. And that's the narrative that they're sticking with. And I think one of our reporters that we had down there, Kate Hussey with WPTV, she did an interview, a pull-aside with AG Uthmeier. He talked all about that. They are going to have the legal resources there. They're going to have religious services there for people. They're doing everything that they can as humanely as possible. I mean, he's really stressing that message because he wants to make sure that he counters that narrative that this is an inhumane facility, or that it's anything close to the concentration camps, which is an ongoing criticism that I hear.
Which is kind of like a little contradictory or a little jarring to the, like, okay, well, there's gators and snakes out there, so anybody who runs away is going to get, go ahead, see how that works out for you.
Exactly.
And that's just also a message that they've been signaling
without a doubt.
certain audience. So you're getting both of these messages depending on what audience you're trying to appeal to.
That's so true. When you put a camera and a microphone in front of somebody, they tend to be a lot more measured. But then on social media, you've got people like Laura Loomer going out there and saying that, this is a free lunch for a whole bunch of alligators. Yeah. And I mean, obviously Loomer does not speak for the administration, and she does not speak for DeSantis people, but that is also the rhetoric that is out there.
I saw a Times of India story, and the headline was something like DeSantis, Florida builds prison with alligators and snakes as security. I mean, it was like...
Well, Homeland Security posted that AI image of a bunch of alligators with ice hats.
Yeah, I saw that. That came out of the White House too. Yeah.
I mean, listen, it just kind of depends on how you see this thing, right? If I think there's also this level of owning libs that exists within the Trump administration, and really leaning into, sometimes,
and the DeSantis administration,
and both, but and just Republicans maybe in general. I mean, I think that they believe that making these jokes, it is violating political correctness, and they love it. They embrace it.
That's their brand.
It absolutely is, and it works for them, arguably, because they've won elections here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I just think in terms of it's marketing genius, what they're doing with this. At the same time, it's repulsive.
It can be. I mean, it depends on how you see it. If you see it as something serious, and you're like, this is the Department of Homeland Security putting out jokes like this, that's disgusting. But then you're also like, it's just a joke. Calm down.
I mean, but you're hearing about, at the same time, we're reading stories about people who've been swept up in these raids, who are
dying in immigration facilities.
Well, that are actually U.S. citizens, that are born here or are citizens. And so to the extent that, but also, should we talk about the contractors? You said, well, no, let me ask you about your reporter who was down there. Did you talk to her afterwards?
I haven't talked to Kate since she was down there, but we were in communication throughout the day. And
what was it like?
well, for her and for most of the press corps, it was a standard presidential visit in a sense, because
you're very restricted.
Yeah, exactly. You get out of a van, you're ushered into a room, and then you wait.
Yeah.
And the only information that you get outside of when the president's coming to the roundtable is, what you see on the pool feed.
Right.
What I thought was interesting and maybe a little frustrating to the journalists that were down there was that, there were, and listen, every president is guilty of doing this. You have a select group of people that are with the traveling pool, right?
Right.
And the Trump administration has really leaned into conservative influencers.
Yes.
So while most of your journalists, whether it was local or national, were all stacked up in that room with the flags and the table, you had guys like Benny Johnson, who's a social media influencer, literally having the run of the place.
Yeah.
Running around and doing videos of the
I had a
cells.
movie club meeting last night, and we were talking about some of this after we got done reviewing our movies.
Yeah.
And someone was saying, oh, he was just getting all these softball questions.
Yes.
And I said, well, I had to explain to them that the White House has changed the way way that the pool reporters are assigned and who's assigned. And so you can expect more of that. And these are a pretty sophisticated bunch of lawyers and folks that are part of my movie club, and I don't know that they were, they don't follow every nuance of what goes on with the White House correspondence. And
no, but it's such a vital
but it was
part.
very noticeable to them. And when I said, oh, I know somebody who was down there, and they were saying, oh, well, he just got all these softball questions.
Nope.
And I said, well, okay, let me explain to you how that works. So
the pool feed was questions like, what do you want to say to Gavin Newsom? When does the first inmate check in to this wonderful facility?
Yeah.
What do you think this says about your ability to get these people out of here and deliver on your promise? Really positive leading questions.
Right.
And that's the new way of doing things with the Trump administration.
Yeah.
And it's worked for them. Again.
I mean, I will say that Governor DeSantis still not so much. I mean, he has his go-tos, but when he doesn't, are they restricting who gets access? I haven't been to one of his events in such a long time.
Most of the time, the governor's team will send out an alert and give anybody the ability to get access as long as they're credentialed press. But I will say this: I think the governor's team, they welcome it. DeSantis has always welcomed.
He's so pugnacious.
And
he loves that.
Yes, he relishes it.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a confrontational question, right?
He does this. He shakes his finger. He points. He spars with the report. He shames
Arguably,
them.
Those are his best sound bites when he gets fired up. And so, I remember when I first started. This was about 6 years ago, and DeSantis really hadn't become a household name yet. But I remember somebody telling me, "Oh, he loves it when you guys ask him questions. He loves it." And that's just because, he's a former litigator, right? He's a JAG lawyer.
Right.
And he obviously very intelligent guy, went to Harvard and Yale, and he can handle a question, a tough question too.
Yeah.
And he's always very good at getting his talking points jammed in there.
Very good. I mean, that's politics 101.
Yeah, but when he has a confrontational moment, typically storms the headlines of Fox or social media. So no, he welcomes
it. Good for him. Yesterday I was watching him. I didn't go out there. Did you go out to Monticello yesterday?
I did go out to Monticello.
Let's talk about that.
Sure.
We're going into the holiday weekend. So I think this is a good thing to
it's a good wrap up.
Yeah.
So we were out there yesterday.
So guess what? The nation is going to have the Declaration of Independence, the 250th anniversary next year. And We are doing America 250 FL. So there,
Yes.
I set it up for you.
Let me see if I can get this right. The semi-quincentennial.
Yes, thank you, because I wasn't even going to try.
Oh, yeah. I had to memorize it a while back. So back in February, you might remember, DeSantis called all of us out to the plaza level of the Capitol building, and he said, we've got a big press conference. We arrive, and there is this shrouded figure standing in the middle of
Literally shrouded.
a shrouded figure standing in the middle of the Capitol, and they throw back the curtain. It was actually a sheet.
That's
and
right.
it's George Washington.
Yeah.
And it's very cool. If you like history like me,
Me too.
there's a really cool. This is a statue that was on loan from Mount Vernon, George Washington's home, and it resides currently in the middle of the Capitol on the sort of main entryway when you come in.
Plaza level.
Yes. And so there it is, this giant statue of George Washington, and it's going to stay there as we get to the semi-quincentennial, which is July 4th of 2026. And DeSantis announced then that he was going to be traveling the state and unveiling more statues in counties that were named after the founding fathers.
Okay.
So that is the appetizer to the main course of yesterday, which was, we went out to Monticello.
Yes.
In Jefferson County.
He's saying Monticello because I believe that he wants to say Monticello.
Monticello is the actual name of Jefferson's plantation primary home in Virginia.
Right. But we here
in the States,
near Cairo, Georgia, call it Monticello.
Well, so we have Monticellos in Iowa too, and that's how I grew up saying it.
All right.
Until some pretentious snob said, "You understand? It's actually Italian for little hill, and and it means I don't know. It means a lot to historians, obviously, but again, shrouded figure on a bench, and DeSantis, actually it was technically...
It literally is an unveiling. One of the only times in journalism when you should use the phrase unveiling.
Yes.
But go ahead.
They removed the curtain. It was Secretary Byrd that did it.
Yes.
And there he is, Thomas Jefferson, drafting the Declaration of Independence.
Sitting down.
Yes, and this is actually one of a series of statues that are all enumerated. It looks a lot like the one that's in Mizzou. And this is the state now owns this one.
Okay.
And so it is not on loan from Mount Vernon. In fact, DeSantis gave a little bit of, He
gave a mini history lesson.
He did. Well, I mean, he was a history teacher at one point, wasn't he, when he was going through college?
Yeah.
The civics in DeSantis just oozed out of him.
It was really on display. I listened to the whole thing, and it was interesting.
Yeah,
and so go ahead, and then I have an observation too.
Well, and this is just a little back and forth of how this is all going to work. He's going to keep doing this and going to some of the other counties.
So we have Hamilton County, Washington County, Monroe County, Franklin County.
We don't have an Adams County though, do we?
No, we don't. Okay. Franklin County, and what's the other one?
John Adams was my favorite founding father.
Franklin, Hamilton, Madison.
Yes, Madison.
Monroe, Washington, and this was, of course, Jefferson County.
And so it's a very cool statue. Again, the state owns it. But here's what I also thought was a little interesting. DeSantis mentioned the Mount Vernon lone statue of Washington that's sitting in the Capitol. Apparently, it's not going to stick around.
No.
It's going to go back to it's going to go back to the White House for the renovation of the Rose Garden.
Yes.
And they're going to have a replica apparently put in place.
Yes.
But this is just, Florida's little way of honoring the founding fathers as we celebrate 250 years of America. And if you like history, like myself, I kind of nerded out my little thread yesterday.
Me too. Oh, I didn't nerd out on my thread, but I nerded out in my head. And I thought it was interesting because the governor gave like a really long talk about all of the accomplishments of Thomas Jefferson, and basically like leading the charge for the revolution, and he was chosen.
Didn't he also invent the swivel chair?
He was an inventor. I don't know what he invented. My family's from Philadelphia. I lived in the Philadelphia area for a short while when I was an adult, but I spent a lot of time as a kid going to the Franklin Museum,
cool.
So I'm very familiar with some of the stuff that Benjamin Franklin invented, but not so much Thomas Jefferson.
Oh, Franklin had a whole list of things, and then he didn't have like a whole like a list of how you should hold yourself, and like it talked about you should live in moderation.
Oh yeah.
And he definitely did not.
No, he was. If you've ever been, have you ever been to Philadelphia?
I've not been to Philly. No.
It's a great city. It is a great city. You should go check it out if you're ever there. There's also a great Rodin museum not far from there. So anyway, this 1,000-pound statue depicts Jefferson with this bronze
quill
with a quill. And DeSantis, like after giving all this very serious, he turns to it and he says to Cord Bird, "Nice, isn't it? He's writing the Declaration of Independence with a quill pen." So I wish I could get a clip of that to put in the show here.
I have a video of him when they unveil him. I just thought it was sort of adorable in a way. Like the veil comes off and DeSantis goes over there and pats him on the back.
He did. He actually touched him. I saw that. I thought, well, that is adorable. But he also, I thought, and this was so interesting with DeSantis yesterday, he talked about the controversy around Jefferson, and acknowledging that he's come under criticism for championing liberty and equality at the same time as owning slaves. And here's what he said. It was always a big, and contrasted him with Washington, who freed all of his slaves before he died. And Jefferson never did that, the governor noted. And he said he really did live as an aristocrat and didn't totally fulfill in his personal life the principles that he put down. So he's criticized for that. And I think that's totally fair. Yeah. And he said he thought it was fair, to look at what the founders did and the decisions they made. But it's wrong to demonize them and act like somehow 250 years later, like, you did this. So that dovetails into this, right? With the governor's office. And we didn't even discuss this.
No, this is all natural.
Yeah, this is all
organic, is what we
very organic. We do call it that.
So at the bottom of these press releases that they've been putting out with regards to the statues as they're being unveiled, they end the document with, "While other jurisdictions are tearing statues of our founding fathers down, Florida is honoring our nation's history and putting statues up." Yeah. And that, again, widely embraced by the conservative circles and Republicans. In fact, we were talking about Benny Johnson earlier. Yeah. He shared my silly little unveiling video on social media.
Oh, wow.
And,
So now you're going viral.
Well, I've gotten so... I just turn off my notifications because it's like if one group picks it up, it's either the Democrats saying this is terrible or it's the Republicans going, this is awesome. Yeah. I don't even participate anymore. I put the information out there and I walk away. It's sort of like
you can
throwing a grenade.
Crazy if you don't.
Exactly. Yeah. But what I think is interesting is that, Republicans have absolutely embraced this mentality. And I think for them, they look at founding fathers, and I thought it was actually... It was a little surprising that DeSantis went as hard as he did on, he had some personal controversies.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's why I'm talking about it, because I was like, wow, that just really kind of
gloss over it.
Or not even, not even address it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought it was really interesting there. But I think for them, it speaks to the deeper issue, right? Which is like, you shouldn't be running from your history. Yeah. Yes, these people were imperfect in their mentality, but they were still the founders of the nation, and that is why they should be upheld. Now, you can make plenty of arguments against that. I think that the other side would say, the people who say, these were racist, white, old men who did, in some cases, terrible things to the people that they owned as property. And should we really be holding them up, or should we be holding up the ideals of the country? What the message and the concept of this country is, which is freedom and equality, rather than these individuals who created, for some people, terrible, terrible situations.
Well, for all men, and then, but black men, black people weren't considered to be human.
Right.
By some of those.
This was also at a time when you couldn't own land if you were a woman, or you couldn't vote. It was before suffrage and all of that as well. So
you had very few rights.
Yeah, it was a different time. But again, there is this opposition between the two.
It's a push-pull.
It is. And I'm one of those people who I always stand by history, and I don't think you should ever run from it. The ugly parts of history need to be understood just as much as the good parts of history. And that's how you educate yourself on the topic. I'm not saying I'm taking a stand on this which is really a contentious issue, still is, whether or not these people should the founders should be, held in regard in institutions. And listen, for me, it's like, it's history. I grew up learning about these figures,
Sure.
and but I also have to look at the world from a different perspective. I'm white. I came from Iowa. I am not a minority by any sense.
You're a man.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a man. I mean, so it's hard for me to understand the frustration from somebody who didn't have that experience, right, growing up. And so I get it. I also get that side of it.
I think about that a lot, that folks like you and me, to a certain extent, will never know what it's like to be a Black person walking down the street or experience their intergenerational trauma. And so I just think that we can't really fully understand what it's like to be someone, but we can have empathy for each other. And I did think I really was sort of taken aback and impressed at the governor for sort of bringing this up,
acknowledging it,
without on his own. It was an interesting moment to me. So anything else that you wanted to talk about with the week in news? Otherwise, I have a couple of fun questions for you.
I think that if we wanted to do an extended edition of this podcast, it would be easy with this news week, but we got to end it somewhere. So give me some questions.
Okay. So this is like a take.
I do have a quick one. I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Who is your favorite founding father? Do you have one?
I mean, I have to say Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah. But what I love again,
he was a womanizer, a skirt chaser.
He died of syphilis, and he was overweight,
and he was brilliant, and he was a printer and an inventor. I mean, he was kind of a Renaissance man. He went over to France and he trick-bagged them into giving us money for the revolution. I love me some Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, he was one of the first political influencers, right? He throws on a coonskin cap and says, "We're poor, impoverished Americans. Please give to the cause." Right. And the French are like, "Oh, these poor Americans."
I know.
Let's hand out. But for me, it was John Adams. And I'll tell you why. It wasn't because of anything he did while he was, president. His term was short and it was not the greatest. But he was such an important part of the American justice system. And when he stood up and represented the British soldiers after the Boston Massacre and said, if we're going to create a new nation, we're going to make sure that we get the justice system right, and it has to be fair. And he said that these people deserve a fair trial, and he largely got most of them off. And, still to this day, I think you look at the Boston Massacre and in your head, it was the images that were depicted at the time, right? Like, that's how we were taught as kids, that the British just opened fire on a mass a gathering in Boston. It's not what happened. The soldiers were surrounded by protesters who started throwing sticks and ice and oyster shells at them. And they were being hit in the head. And there's still some question as to where the first shots came from and whether it came from the crowd or whether it came from the soldiers. But at the same time, this was more than just a bunch of soldiers opening fire on a crowd. It was a commotion that devolved to the point where shots were fired, people were killed. And then obviously, Adams stood up and said, we got to defend these people. We got to do it. Now, I think he was reluctant to do it at first, but he felt like it was more important that these people had a fair, you needed to show as we begin this new country.
Right, it was a test for
yes, exactly.
how
that you
the
can
system is
you can
going to
have
work.
a fair justice system.
Yeah. That
these people in an angry city like Boston can still get a fair trial.
Gosh, you just really demonstrated to what an unserious person I am. I go for the guy with syphilis, chasing skirts in France, and eating caviar and drinking champagne and
No.
And you're
Benjamin
like, you
is
take
still-
this very high-minded. That's, you know, I think you can read as much or as little into all that as you want. Let me ask you.
Yeah.
So this is a little thing that they do on this British show that I watch. They have a room, and I can't remember what the room of it is, but so you have one object that you can or something, doesn't have to be a tangible object, that you can banish to this room, and like we will never have to deal with it ever again. What would be on your list of being sent to the room of no return?
Social media.
Social media. You didn't even bat an eyelash.
No, that feels right.
Okay.
And I know that, you know, we're literally working on a product of social media right now. I mean,
Yes,
like
we are.
but I feel like there are a lot of problems with the world right now. And I think a lot of it surrounds us because of social media.
I've been saying this for years.
Misinformation, disinformation,
100%.
it propagates. And listen, as a journalist, of course, you could point a finger at me and say, that guy right there just wants to go back to being the gatekeeper of information. There's a difference, though. And I tell people this all the time about journalism. It is so important, and we put so much effort into the stuff that we create, and we recognize the risks of misinformation and disinformation and lying, because we could face, penalties at work. We could face lawsuits that forces us to be, I believe, as accurate as possible. And it also puts out into the free market of ideas truth and fact. And social media, AI-generated images scares the hell out of me.
Me too. We've talked about it before. I'm going to get somebody on to another expert to talk about that soon. Here's another one. It's kind of the opposite.
Sure.
You go to a desert island and you can only bring, and it's kind of a passé question, because now with technology, you can bring a playlist of whatever you want. Like on your playlist, if you had one album, what would you bring? Or one book or one album, what would you bring?
Can I bring a boat?
Can you bring a boat? He's firing on all cylinders. No, you're locked in the room with all the stuff that can't return. What do you bring in there with?
That's tough. These questions.
Oxford English Dictionary for me.
Oh, that's good. That would be actually a very
book.
Interesting read.
Do you ever read the dictionary?
I've never tried it, but I mean, it doesn't sound as boring as it might.
The OED is my favorite because it actually has like little excerpts,
Oh, sure.
So it's and I had a really bigger edition than what I have now that had a little magnifying glass because the print was so fine, because it was, so now I have kind of the condensed.
Sure.
It's only 2 volumes, but I think that would, I would be allowed to get away with that. If I had one record, I was trying to decide on the car on the way over here what it would be. Record, I still call it a record. It would be Kid A.
Okay.
Or Best of Nina Simone.
I would probably do Best of the Talking Heads. Big David Byrne fan.
I saw Talking Heads twice in concert.
I think they're fascinating.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They are. All right. Well, there you have it. The week in review with my old pal Forrest Saunders, Capitol Bureau reporter for EW Scripps. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida, hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC.